Greetings, this is Professor Theo Williams, and this is a commentary for both forms number 4 and number 5. For form number 4, you were asked to report on what the difference was between a sojourner and a migrant. And a lot of you did a pretty good job of just making that distinction, that a sojourner is someone who visits or goes to another place or another country with the full expectation of one day returning home. And whereas a migrant, they normally go to that country and their expectation is to stay and make that country a permanent residence. And so the biggest difference is the intentionality, what is expected, what they're trying to accomplish. And it really does change how that person views the country. It changes the investment and the level of attachment that person has to the country. For example, if you are a sojourner and you know you're just going to a place, I think about missionary work, especially short-term missions, or maybe if you are a student who's studying abroad, you will invest, you'll get everything you can get out of that country, you'll give back. But in the back of your mind, you always know that this is just a temporary situation that you're only passing through. And whenever you have that passing through mentality, it will impact how you invest. It will impact your level of attachment. It will impact your level of comfort when you know that you're only passing through. I'm often reminded of in Jeremiah when the people of Israel were in Babylonian captivity and they were longing to go back home, and they got word to the prophet Jeremiah that God wanted them to stay where they were at for a little while longer. And he told them to build houses, to marry, to have children, to really invest. And he says, seek first the peace and the prosperity of the city which I've taken you into exile, and that's where you're going to find your own peace and prosperity. And what this means is, for those who had that only passing through mentality, they weren't really investing. They were like, well, why bother to invest when we're leaving soon? So God said, no, you're not leaving soon. And if you want to prosper, if you want to have peace, if you want to have all the things that you want to have, you're going to have to seek that for the place that I've now taken you to, because now you are one of them. And so imagine if you were on a ship and you were the captain of that ship, and the ship was starting to take on water, and you knew you had these lifeboats. So in the back of your mind, you're going to try to save the ship. You're going to bail water, but in the back of your mind, you know that you have an escape route. But imagine if you find out that there are no more lifeboats. All of a sudden now you're going to bail the water and try to save the ship on a whole nother level, because now you are a permanent fixture. Now if the ship goes down, that means you go down with the ship. And so I think that's a great distinction that we make between a sojourner and a migrant, that oftentimes sojourners aren't going to have that same level of attachment, that same level of investment, because they know that they're going to get whatever they're getting, whether it's an education, whether it's to do some missionary work, and then they know they're going to return home. But the mentality does change when you're not returning home, because this is your new home. And so I think most of you made that particular distinction. You talked about the different mentalities. You talked about the difference between the voluntary and the forced migrant workers. And that's also a different mentality, because if you're there by choice, you want to be at that place. Say, for example, if someone came to America because they thought America was the best place ever, and they had to want to achieve the American dream, they're going to come with a certain mentality. But say if someone came to America because they were forced to leave their country, so they were fleeing, or maybe they came by force. Think about slavery. In those particular regards, all of a sudden those individuals may not have the same mentality, may not have the same level of attachment and affinity towards the country. So the reason for being here will impact how those individuals carry themselves while they're here. So that would be it for form number 4. For form number 5, you were asked to give a distinction between the 3 types of social capital. And social capital is basically saying that you have these individuals' resources, human resources. So now we're not talking about finances, we're not talking about property, we're not talking about things of that nature. We're talking about who do you have in your influence and your surroundings that you could pull upon. So we're talking about these human resources, this social capital. You're in need of someone to do some work for you. You're in need of someone to volunteer. You're in need of someone to babysit, wherever it may be. Who can you call upon? Who's your social capital? And there were 3 types of social capital that the book talked about. And those were bonding, bridging, and linking. Now, bonding, and the easiest way to remember bonding, just think about most bonds that you have with individuals. In order to have a bond with a person, you have to be close to that person. So think of close in proximity as well as close as far as emotional speaking and things of that nature, socially and economically speaking. You're close as far as living in the same neighborhood. This is the capital, the bridge. This is the capital, the link that you have with someone, the network that you have with someone who is part of your own community. So think within a family structure. The husband, the wife, the children, they all have bonding capital because they are linked together through the family. Think within a certain school system, the students to one another, that would be bonding. And within a church setting, the congregation to one another, that would be bonding. These are the networks that you have that are kind of peer-to-peer with your contemporaries. In other words, the book describes it as a horizontal, reaching across network. Someone who's on my level, we have some similar things in common as far as economically and things of that nature. We have some similar goals in mind. We live in the same neighborhood, so we want to see the same things for our neighborhood. How we reach out to one another, in time of need, that would be how do we access that bonding social capital. And some of you talked about Gator's examples between the relationships between you and your classmates, or the relationship between family members or congregants in regards to social capital. Bridging capital, and the easiest way to remember that, bond close. When you're closely, there's a bond. When something's a little bit more distant yet still on an even playing field, to get from one place to another place, you may have to build a bridge. Same thing as far as this concept. Now you're saying, well, from one family to another family, from one church to another church, from one school to another school, from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. Here are individuals that where we're on similar footing, but we're just in different locations. And maybe the resources that we have at our school differs from the resources you have at your school, so we do a little barter system. Maybe think about in agricultural and rural America, and you had close-knit families. And maybe one family owns a lot of livestock and another family owns more farmland as far as produce. And they barter with one another. We give you some of this if you would give us some of that. That would be this bridging capital. Here's when you look at others who are on your level but in a different location, and you say, hey, what do you got going on over there that may benefit us, and vice versa. And the last one we talked about was linking. And the easiest way to think about this is when you're trying to get future employment, things of that nature, and you're trying to get yourself out there as far as networking, there's a site called LinkedIn. And this is when people can see your resume and things of that nature and possibly hire you. And so now here's when there's this vertical relationship. It's not just simply, it could be within the same community. It could be I'm in one community and you're in another community. So that's not what's important. What's important is there's this hierarchical relationship. There's someone at a lower position, there's someone at a higher position, and this linking capital would be, hey, let me call on this person in a higher position. So think about times when we're in need and we need a reference, or for some of us who are missionaries and you need to raise support, and it pays off to know someone who owns their own business or something like that. So think about those relationships you have where it's not exactly peer-to-peer, but here's someone who may be further along in a particular area than you, and in that particular area, you may call upon their expertise. And so in other areas, maybe they may call upon you, and you may be the one who has a little bit more power. And so don't just think of financially, although finances is a big part of it, but just think of maybe someone has a little bit more clout in a particular neighborhood, and you want to call upon them to get you linked in with someone, and they're going to put in a good word for you. Or maybe they do have more money than you and you need to get support for some reason. Or maybe they're the person who does the hiring and you want them to put in a good word to see if they can get you hired. Whatever it may be, it just denotes that there's this hierarchical relationship, that there's some who are above some others in particular aspects, who have a little bit more power or clout or resources in particular aspects, and you're simply calling upon that person to help you out in that regards. And so it's rarely clear cut all the time that this is the person. It changes between contexts. Like I said, in some contexts, you may be the person reaching up to them. In other contexts, someone may be reaching up to you. It just depends on perspective. All right, so this is Professor Williams. This has been a commentary on both forms number 4 and 5. I just want to encourage you to continue to turn in those interviews. They're due today, so make sure you get those into me. And then I'm going to shoot a video or maybe just make an announcement about what's to be expected for that final intercultural guide. Hope you've enjoyed the semester thus far. Let's finish up strong. Take care and God bless.